week we return all our cans and bottles. Yeah, we help to reduce the world's waste.
But aluminum? It's like gold. Oh, yeah.
Environmental defense. Get green. For more environmentally friendly tips, go to getgreen.com.
Oh, there's a bottle.
Where?
Right over there. To your left. To your left. There you go. You got it.
Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs. Welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory. My guest here today is John Donath. We've done a lot of shows on Long Island Backstory about people who have been abused by the judicial system, either by biased judges, corrupt judges, judges that have been influenced by other people, and just people whose lives have been destroyed by the system. And a lot of times they come to me and they say, Gary, you've got to do the show about this. The system is broken. And my answer to them is, no, the system's not broken at all. This is the way the system is designed to work. Today, my guest says he really didn't have a problem with the system. He didn't have a problem with the lawyers, didn't have a problem with the bad judge. His issue is the whole system itself and what it did to him and his divorce and how it damaged his life. So John, welcome to the program. I don't want to get too much into the specifics because you've done a lot of research into what needs to change and you become an advocate for change and an activist. I know you've gone up to Albany lobbying, and I think you give a different perspective to it again because you can't come in here and say, hey, this judge screwed me, this lawyer screwed me. It's the broken, what we say is the broken system. Correct. Which isn't broken. It is the system. This is what we have to deal with that really caused this. And you use the word in some of your writings that you felt you had to bribe your wife in order to get rights to see your children on what's fair and 50-50 and what's in the best interest of your child. What do you mean by you had to bribe your wife to get the right thing to happen?
Well, what I mean, Gary, is that when we were splitting up the assets, basically in New York State, the default is if you go to court, courts will award custody to one parent or the other.
Right.
It's an all or nothing game. So if you want to do things a little differently than all or nothing, you basically have to give someone something in return for something they want to give for them to
because they know that in most cases the woman's gonna win.
Correct.
Custody. So that's sort of dangling over your head, hey, if you don't give me this, I'll just go to court, 90-something% chance I'm going to win.
Correct.
And you're going to get nothing, which is
Correct.
you're going to get Wednesday dinner and every other weekend and lose all your rights to being a parent.
Correct, including the ability to help have a say in decision making.
Well, you become an ATM, basically. I mean, they use
Correct.
the word that will give joint custody, but it's bullshit.
Right.
There is no such thing as joint custody because the person who gets awarded custody makes all the decisions anyway.
Right.
What are you going to go back to court? I mean, yes, they say you can go back to court. You're going to run back to court every time and spend 3 years in court. By the time you get to court, the issue's already been resolved.
Correct.
So what is it that you wanted when you got divorced from your wife?
Well, first of all, I wanted joint legal custody, number one. And number two, I wanted to have, ideally 50-50 time with my son, but definitely more than just Wednesday dinner and alternate weekends.
Right.
And eventually what I ended up getting was in a 2-week, 14-day cycle, I got 5 out of 14 days. And in addition, I got most of the Jewish holidays, which were very important to me, and about half of the civil holidays.
Right. So, but you're saying you had to pay for that. And
Yeah.
What do you mean? I mean, I guess you ended up going to mediation, I'm assuming, because
Right.
you couldn't have gone to the court. This would never happen.
Correct.
In court. So you went to a mediator.
We went to a mediator.
Okay. And they said what? I mean,
And
what would her objection be to 50-50 time?
Basically, originally her lawyer started out saying that, we're such a high conflict case that we're unable to communicate with each other, so it's in the best interests of the child not to have 50-50.
Oh, that's great that
And-
the lawyer determines that it's not in the best interest.
So,
50-50.
so then, as we started this, and the mediator turned to my ex-wife and said, today most psychologists believe that an increased participation of both parents is what's in the child's best interests. And so, why do you feel differently? And when her lawyer ran out of objections, basically he said, well, you guys know that if I go to court, I'm going to get full anyway.
Right.
So, that's what we're going to do, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. I know, we push for mediation, and it's definitely better than going to court, but I don't think we have fair mediation because in the back of the person's head, they're always saying, well, listen, I know what I can get. So people end up giving more than they would because they use the word entitled, which drives me crazy.
Yeah.
You're entitled because the paper says it, but they'll say, well, I'm entitled to 21% of your income and 50% of extracurricular. This is what I'm entitled to. So that becomes the benchmark for what you have to pay. You're saying you had to even pay a higher number that couldn't allow you to live comfortably.
Well, basically what happened was there were some assets that she was claiming, which were assets that I brought with me from the marriage that were given to me by my parents. My parents, throughout my childhood, saved money for myself and my two sisters to give to us when we became adults, and she ended up taking a big chunk of that money.
Right. Which she probably wouldn't have gotten if she went to court.
Correct. So the mediator basically worked out an agreement, where she got more financially, and
And you
she
got to
got what
see
she
the
was
kids
demanding.
more.
Yeah, and I got to my son.
Your son, okay.
I have a son from her. One
Right,
son.
right. So basically, you paid to see your own.
Correct.
You paid to see your own son.
Correct.
And this financial settlement, how did it leave you? Was there enough money there, or people watching and say, well, maybe he had enough money, so it didn't matter? I mean, were you still living a lavish lifestyle after the divorce?
No, after the divorce, I was forced to move back in with my parents in my parents' basement. And while I paid rent to my parents, it was clearly below market rent. And I was getting full, not just a place to live, but full room and board for that money as well.
Right, right.
So basically, I sort of felt like I was a college student again, except one
Right.
with a full-time job.
Right, right. You said one of the things that you experienced in the divorce that I highlighted to you was the inherent bias towards men, and I think
Right.
especially men who have jobs, who are responsible.
Correct.
Because if you didn't have a job in your home, you can argue, well, I'm the stay-home parent. But when you have a job, it gets used against you
Right.
in court. Tell me a little bit about that. And you mentioned that even as far as with your marriage counselor that you went to, that there was a bias towards towards.
Well, we went to two
fathers.
marriage counselors. The first one was biased. The second one was fair.
Okay.
But to clarify that. But I was working at the time for a Wall Street company. My office literally was on Wall Street, and my ex-wife had a job that she's a New York City public school teacher, and they were holding for her, and she could have gone back to it at any time. So originally we agreed that she would stay home with the baby for 6 months, and obviously the first thing her lawyer told her when she
Don't go back to work.
Don't go back to work.
Right.
Yeah, even though she had, the job they were holding for her, and she went back to work a year after the divorce was settled. Much later.
Once the papers are done.
Yeah, and in the meantime, so I was working, my Wall Street job, and my boss was very good to me. He gave me an assignment where I was able to work with people in India, so I was able to do that, off business hours at home, which enabled me to be at home at a reasonable time, like 6-7 p.m. from Wall Street, which is unheard of for a Wall Street company. But that was because I was doing the stuff with India.
Right. Well, explain a little bit more what you mean about that you felt there was a bias towards men.
Right. So I mean,
Or
when
fathers, I should say.
when we walked into the marriage counselor's office, she somehow found a way to twist everything around and make it my fault.
Right.
And
I'm assuming this is a woman marriage counselor?
yeah, this was a woman. Yeah, they were both
I guess it
women.
could be a man too, but.
Yeah. Yes, it was amazing. Like, for example, she took my opinion on a political opinion about the New York City transit strike, which was going on then, and I was supportive of the union workers who were striking, and she basically said, I'm like that because I like to make trouble,
Right.
and
And unfortunately, all that stuff that comes up could be used against you because
Yeah.
it's in the back of your ex-wife's head. Hey, if we go to court, they're going to subpoena the psychologist who's going to come in and say, hey, my John is crazy. He's, he tries to make a difficult thing and everything that he does is difficult. He's always trying to cause problems. So that's definitely an issue. So do you think your settlement that you were done, are you happy with your settlement that was done? I'm assuming you're happy that you're seeing your son.
I'm happy that I have my son in my life. You know, at this point, you know, I was able to rebuild my life. You know, I have a beautiful wife who's sitting here in the studio with us. And, you know, I mean, for 3 years I lived in my parents' basement, and my parents took all the rent money that I paid them and they saved it and invested it. And then when my wife and I got married, they gave it back to me. And we were able to use that part of it. I mean, as a down payment for our house.
Right.
And you know, I mean, I make no secret about the fact that my wife brings home a heavy portion of our net income that we live off,
Right.
and I bring home a much smaller piece of it.
Right.
Because of the expenses that are related to my son. But the most important thing is that, you know, as far as I mean, I wish I had my son more time. You know, I wish it were 50-50, but you know, as much as I can, you know, I am an involved parent, and I do see him regularly, and you know, I am an influence on his life. I mean, it still comes up as issues that, you know, extracurricular stuff that I want for my son. I can give you 2 examples: Hebrew lessons and his sessions with his psychologists. You know, that all has to be done on my time. But you know, and if I had more time, it would be easier to schedule and arrange all that.
Right. One of the issues that you had was with the taxing and the child support.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Sure. So, you know, when people get divorced in general, you know, you have the same incomes supporting 2 households. That previously supported 1 household are now supporting two households. Now, the first thing that happens when divorce goes through is you go from married status to single status on your federal tax return.
Which is bad.
Which means you're paying more taxes.
Right.
If anything, you need the money to help. Now, in addition to that, child support is not tax deductible to the payer and not taxable to the receiver. Typically, the one paying the child support is the one with the higher income.
Right.
Which means that basically you're taking money that would be taxed at a higher rate, giving it to someone who's being taxed at a lower rate.
Right.
So additional money there going to the government.
Right. So you think that's done? That's sort of set up like that on purpose? Because I think a lot of what we talk about is that the reason things turn out the way they do is because of money.
Right.
And there are women who lose custody, but a lot of times the women make money. If you look at the cases where the woman loses custody, many times it's a successful woman where she could pay child support. Right. So, like you said, it's the person who makes the money usually loses custody and ends up paying child support.
You know, I mean, in fact, despite my extra time, with my son, I don't have any breaks on the child support. And in fact, I mean, it's good in the sense that I could say that my desire to be with my son more is exclusively desire to be with my son. I have no financial incentive to be that way. But my lawyer.
But in fairness, you should pay less.
Yeah, in New York State, you know, many states do give you credit if you have more than the typical amount of time for your sons. In New York State, my understanding is from my lawyer that they've ruled that even in situations where it's truly 50-50, the richer parent is paying the poor parent full child support, 100%.
No, I think it's either all or nothing, unless you agree out of court. But which isn't fair. But if you did it the other way, where you said, well, if the one parent gets more time, they pay less. Now there's a financial incentive not to give you your son. I'm guessing because your ex-wife is getting that money every month, no matter what. She's not going to fight as much for you seeing your son because she can still get her money.
Correct.
So whereas if she was going to lose money, she would probably, I don't know her, but she would probably say, hey, I don't want him to get him as much so I don't lose that money.
And I feel that over the years, you know, as the anger and the bitterness of the divorce has gone by, I mean, she filed for divorce in 2006, so it's been 9 years since then, 8 years since we separated. And, you know, I feel that, you know, now she's more like, you know, she wants to do things on her own, you know, and it's sort of a convenience for her that, you know, she doesn't have to worry about my son all the time.
And doesn't have to worry about the money changing. In fact, you mentioned where in 2008 you made less money than you did previously, yet your child support didn't go down.
Correct. Yeah, in 2000, I was working in credit derivatives back in 2000 up to 2008, and you know, if you know anything about what happened in the credit derivatives are backed by mortgages, and we all know what happened to the housing market in 2008. Right. So I took the warning sign, and a friend of mine from college offered me a job with an algorithmic trading company. So I took that job, but it was a 10% pay cut. By the way, it probably was smart to do it, but my boss was laid off, and several of my colleagues were laid off a few months later from my first company. But since I left voluntarily for a lower paying job, obviously I didn't, was no chance I was going to get a lower child support.
Right, which is difficult. It's already, you're paying a lot of money and now you're making less, and on top of that. One of the things we talk about was the CSEU Child Support Enforcement Unit, and I think that's got to be one of the worst government agencies we have. They're just abusive. They don't care about the right to due process, and it's just a money grab thing. But you mentioned that you had an experience with the Child Support Agency even before you had a child.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
I am financial secretary of my synagogue. I still hold that position. I started that position in 2004. My son was born in 2005. We got a nasty letter from the child support enforcement detailing how basically threatening the synagogue that if we didn't withhold money from his paycheck, and with coupons from our custodian's paycheck and send it to them, God knows what they would do to the synagogue. And it contained a lot of personal information, not just about the custodian, but about the woman and the child,
which is none of your business.
Right,
With all
as
due
an
respect,
employer.
I mean, you should know that.
And I also, the first thing that would flash through my mind at the time, not knowing, that this is standard procedure, was deadbeat dad.
Guy. Right. Well, everyone throws around that term, deadbeat dad. If you get a letter from child support, but they don't know the story.
Yeah, frankly, this was really, as an employer, none of my business what was happening, and I was scared by that letter.
Right, well, a lot of employers are scared when they get that letter.
And I've done IRS tax liens on other employees, and for other reasons. And the IRS didn't send such a nasty letter to me. They just said we'd garnish the money and send it to us.
That's the end of the story. You become an advocate for changing the family law system. Most people, when they go through this, they're just so disgusted with it. It's just a horrible experience in their life, and they want to move on. What's making you drive up to Albany, take off time from work, do a show like this, go to meetings? Why not just move on? It's 8 years ago. Why are you still fighting to change the system?
The reason is sitting right over there. It's my wife. Basically, when my wife, met me, and my wife was disgusted by the way I was being treated, and she's like, you don't just complain about it, do something.
Right.
And so, she's encouraged me to, go up and advocate.
Because it's not easy. Because it's reliving painful things, and sometimes it's easier. And you're meeting a lot of other people who are struggling, which you're a caring guy. You feel bad about that. So, it does take a lot. And I guess having the encouragement of your wife, that's what keeps you going on it. Here are some of the things that you said that needed to change in one of your trips up to Albany, and I just want to go through them, and you could just tell me a little bit about why you feel each one of these things needs to change. That the child custody being awarded, as you described, to one parent when they go to court.
Right. So the court should have all the options available to act in the child's best interests. And when you have two good parents, and my ex-wife and I never disputed each other's parenting abilities. There's always things you can nitpick about, but they're minor things. But it's if you have two good parents, then maybe not 50-50, but at least 1/3 of the time with each parent.
Right. What about lawyers being able to drag out divorce negotiations so that they can bill more hours?
Yeah, so that is a big problem. In my case, what typically happened was whenever we got a settle, after we went through mediation and my ex-wife's lawyer drafted an agreement, and then before I knew it, we got a drafted agreement, and there were a few mistakes. So I called I read the agreement. Within a few days I got back to my lawyer.
You think there were mistakes, John? Do you think
this.
that they were put in there? Because every time you got to call back to fix that mistake,
and then my lawyer sent it back.
$350 for you, $350 for him.
It's more than that because, and then there were mistakes. So I called, my lawyer sent back, please correct these mistakes. So then a few months later, I got another draft. The mistakes were corrected, but other mistakes were introduced.
You keep calling them mistakes. I'm not so sure
I'm
they're
giving
mistakes.
them the benefit of the doubt.
I'm not sure, because they're billable mistakes. What other industry? You get to make a mistake and then charge your clients for the mistake you made.
It eventually just wore me down to the point that the agreement I signed, was not perfectly what we agreed on in mediation, but was close enough.
Right, you just wanted to move on.
Yeah.
What about the courts not enforcing agreements other than financial? as far as decisions and parenting time and things like that?
It's it's a difficult thing because there are regular violations, and the most I've ever done is have a lawyer write a letter to my ex-wife over violations. And you have to keep in mind that the way the courts will see it, or the way I like to see it, is two wrongs don't make a right. So just because the other party, the best thing you could do is remain faithful to the agreement, even if you feel the other party is violating it,
Right.
because that'll make you solid and good if you do have to walk into court.
Right.
But typically what would happen, from what I understand, and I've never tried this myself, I think it's in my son's best interest not to go back to court, is to is that the judge will just give your wife, the violator, a warning. Don't do that again.
If that.
Even if, yeah.
I tell people when they go to court for parenting time, sometimes it takes a year or two to get to court, and if they ever do really get in front of the judge, the worst that would happen was don't do that again.
Yeah.
But now 2 years has gone by with them getting away with it again, and you spent all this money. The only thing that they really do enforce is money.
Right.
God forbid you miss a payment, they're after you and they will enforce it.
Right. That's interesting with the
Which
money.
is selective enforcement.
With the money is because I wonder, because part of my agreement is that we would both take out life insurance policies. So I took out my life insurance policy, no problem. My ex-wife never took out a life insurance policy, and at this point she's a cancer survivor.
Right.
So I don't know if I took her into court for not taking out a life insurance policy, it would make me look really bad.
Right. Well, you'd look bad, but the reality is you have an agreement. It should be followed.
I know.
She should follow the agreement. That's a person, but it's not right that you have to think about, how much is this going to cost me? How am I going to look? And is that going to open up a can of worms? And now she's going to punish me by taking my son from me. It shouldn't be that.
It's interesting because my lawyer, in one of my consultations, sort of said, she didn't say this outright, but she said that, sort of hinted that I'm not being a responsible parent by letting the life insurance issue slide.
Right. Well, it's true because if you have to become a sole parent, it's in there for a reason. It would be nice to have the life support, the life and
I want to support my son with my own money. I don't
Right.
need her money.
Right.
That's the way I think of it.
All right. Well, that's good. Hopefully, hopefully, I'm sure you don't wish, you don't wish that happens to
Definitely not.
your ex-wife. So. Hopefully that won't become an issue. What about lawyers protecting one another? I know you think that this lawyer is fighting this lawyer, but you mentioned lawyers you felt almost in collusion with each other.
Correct. I feel that lawyers are very much in collusion with each other. It's interesting the way my case ended was I have a friend who's a criminal lawyer. He practiced in Florida, and so he was in New York temporarily because his wife was working on a residency in a rare area of medicine where the only program available was in New York, so he gave up his practice of law to to support her through that. And he suggested to me that the way to end the problem is to find the issue with the lawyer and threaten the bar complaint.
Right.
He said even though bar complaints typically get resolved in favor of the lawyer,
Typically they do.
He said, yeah, they
But they're a hassle.
he said the worst 6 months of his life was when a client of his filed a bar complaint against him. So
Right.
he said if I could find something, then he can write it up in legalese, and the case will probably end. So indeed, on my birthday when I went to pick up my son, my ex-wife wanted me to turn over a title to her car, which was registered in my name, and which I already turned over to her. To make a long story short, she's told me that her lawyer said that she shouldn't let me see my son till I turned over the title to her car. So I, right away started recording it, and in her presence. So she called her lawyer and told her lawyer that I'm recording, and got into an argument with her lawyer over the phone over what the other lawyer. She had two lawyers, so she got the other one on the phone. That Carol told me it's legal not to give me the son, and her lawyer said, no, you can't do that. And like her lawyer, who previously had no problem talking to me directly, all of a sudden refused to talk to me on the phone because lawyers are not supposed to talk to the other party without that person's lawyer against. The bottom line is the next day I called my lawyer and I said, listen, I have this recording, and part of the recording is my threatening to make a bar complaint.
Right.
And so my lawyer took it very seriously, and the case ended very quickly.
Yeah, it's
after
funny,
that.
right? That's what it took to.
And I wasn't even threatening my lawyer with a bar complaint.
Just heard the bar complaint. So,
I was threatening the other lawyer with a bar complaint.
So maybe people who were listening who were saying, hey, my case is dragging on, maybe this is what they do, is need to file a complaint, maybe even just for dragging it on.
Yeah.
You know, just something like, but like I said, most don't really, you go into other lawyers, but maybe that's what they need to do and to move their case along. Well, John, I really appreciate it. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't get to. I know you were also trying to change the culture as people feel about divorced people, as far as calling them deadbeat dads, and the negativity towards fathers who want to be involved in their children's life, the school's attitude towards a divorced father. They automatically, and I experienced it myself, assume that the mother is the custodial parent, and they treat you as a second-class citizen, and you don't get treated the same way. So there are a lot of things that you want to change, and I appreciate everything that you're doing, and keep up the good fight. Thanks very much, John. I'm Gary Jacobs, and thank you for joining us on Long Island Backstory.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital. I feel like a fish with no water.
You know how to react to their asthma attacks. Here's how to prevent them. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS. Visit www.noattacks.org or call your doctor. Because even one attack is one too many.
Here's the 2-1.
Hi, I'm Barry Bonds for RAD, recording artists, actors, and athletes against drunk driving. In my league, we hit home runs without a designated hitter. But if you want to get home safe, there should always be a designated driver. So when you're with someone who is drinking, take their keys. Call a cab or drive them home yourself. Because friends don't let friends drive drunk.
Think being a big brother means you always have to be a perfect role model?
Nice.
Think again. To learn more about becoming a big brother or big sister, call 1-888-412-BIGGS.